Knights, and welcome to the final element of the Showa Godzilla re-review series. Yes, indeed, we've finally come to the final installment of the original Showa series from 1954 to 1975. Guest that I was planning to have join me today, he had to opt out because of some potential medical issues, but hey, you got me, so oh well. Hang on 1 second. Okay, that's better. Hang on a second. Somebody's texting me. Okay. So anyway, yes, indeed. Today I will be reviewing the 1975 finale to the original Godzilla series, Terror, which will be the last Godzilla movie to be directed by, of course, the father of Godzilla himself, Ishiro Honda. Produced by both Tomoyuki Tanaka and Henry G. Saperstein. Written by Yukiko Takayama, which I believe this is his only Godzilla movie. I could be wrong, but as of right now, it's his last. And starring Katsuhiko Sasaki, Tomoko Ai, Akihiko Hirata in also his final Godzilla movie. Katsumasa Uchida, Goro Mutsumi, who I believe was the guy who played Jet Jaguar's creator, Godzilla vs. Megalon. Tadao Nakamaru and Toru Kawai, who played Godzilla. And this would be the last Godzilla movie for quite a while that would have its music done by Akira Fukube. However, of course, this was the last Godzilla movie of the original series, of course, to have its music done by Akira Fukube. So really, the only thing that's missing in this last triumvirate for Godzilla's final hurrah is Eiji Tsuburaya, who of course passed away in 1970. But Teruyoshi Nakano would still once again take over the special effects for this film, and yay for him. So Terror Mechagodzilla is an interesting film. It is a direct sequel to the previous movie, which I do like. Direct sequels are not done very often, not just in Japanese franchises, at least the ones that I've seen, but specifically in monster movie franchises, and especially in Godzilla. There is absolutely no doubt that this movie is a direct sequel to Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. The only film that I can really name off the top of my head that can be called, yeah, that's a direct sequel, ironically, is another Mechagodzilla movie, is Godzilla Tokyo SOS, where that movie is no doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, a direct sequel to its predecessor. I'm not going to count the Heisei series for all you quote-unquote Godzilla purists out there saying, well, the whole series has its own continuity, which, yes, it does, but it's extremely flawed continuity, as I will get into when I get to the dreaded Heisei series. But anyway, so I like the fact that this movie is a direct sequel. Japanese franchises don't really do that very often. A lot of times with Japanese franchises, continuity is kind of loose, especially when it comes to like action shows or monster movie shows. Like the Kamen Rider series has kind of a loose continuity, especially when you get to the Heisei series, when it then just turns into a big fucking mess. The Ultraman franchise kind of has a strong continuity. Then once again, when it gets to the Heisei series, turns into a fucking mess. Super Sentai is really all over the place, but that's one thing I do admire about this movie, is that it does get the continuity pretty solid with its predecessor. One of the good things that I can say about the Heisei Gamera trilogy is that they all have a fantastic sense of continuity. So I do like that about those movies. But Terror Mechagodzilla is also an interesting movie because to this day, it remains as the lowest grossing Godzilla movie ever made in the entire franchise. Now, this, I believe, was because of a couple of things. One, obviously, was because TV was absolutely killing the Japanese film industry. It was absolutely strangling it. It's not even funny how much TV was killing the Japanese film industry at the time. But also, Japan was going through some environmental issues, I believe. The biggest of which being Japan was suffering a gas shortage. So for some reason, that had to put a permanent axe on the Godzilla franchise for 9 years until they rebooted the series when Toho got itself back on its feet. Um, Hang on a second. Let me look through something. Okay. Which is unfortunate because this movie did, despite this movie getting positive and favorable reviews, this movie was the least attended Godzilla movie in theaters because the Japan film industry was just going through such a tumultuous situation at the time that Toho Toho had to put the monster movie making machine on hold for a good long while, and this included some other monster movies that they wanted to make, and also some supposed other Godzilla sequels that um, were said to be written slash made at the time, one of which apparently being Godzilla versus the Devil. However, Andres Perez told me back when he and I used to talk, he did tell me that's apparently a myth, and that's not true. There's also another rumor where there was supposed to be a Showa version of Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, though I don't know if that's true or not. And then, of course, there's the infamous A Space Godzilla script that was supposed to be the 16th Godzilla movie. But of course, that did not get made. Look up the history of A Space Godzilla. It's really interesting at just how what the fuck it is. um, so yeah, look that up. But it's unfortunate that the series had to end when it did. However, at least it does end on a good note. Terra Mechagodzilla for me is also a bit of an interesting movie because I didn't like this movie that much when I first saw it. I thought it paled in comparison to Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. I thought it was just a big letdown to the previous film. Um, I thought the characters were inferior. I thought the story was inferior. I just thought this movie in general was inferior to its predecessor. So I just really didn't care for it when I was younger. But of course, I got this movie on the classic media um, Godzilla set that my stepmom got me for my birthday, and of course I watched the film then, and it kind of grew on me a little bit, but I still could never really get into it because I wanted to see the Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, not this one. So it of course I finally did get Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, and I watched that, then I watched this, and as time grew on, I did start to appreciate this movie a lot more. And also, when I watched this movie with its audio commentary by Keith Eichen and Bob Johnson, great audio commentary for the record for this film, fantastic in my opinion. Probably my second favorite audio commentary on the classic media set. Um, anyway, when I listened to this audio commentary, that's when my appreciation for this movie really, really, really started to grow. And now I can legitimately say that this is one of my favorite Godzilla movies. in the entire franchise. Though I will admit, and this might be kind of a common thing for a lot of Godzilla fans to say, I do think this movie is still, in a few ways, inferior to Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. This is a great monster movie. Don't get me wrong. This is a great monster movie. It's very entertaining. It's very well made. However, for my personal taste, I do think this movie is inferior to its predecessor. Though that's not saying that this is a bad movie by any means, and not by a long shot. And also, of course, this was the last Godzilla movie to be directed by Ishiro Honda. Now, why Ishiro Honda came back to direct this film, honestly, to my knowledge, is unknown. I've heard some sources say that Ishiro Honda was just desperate for work and desperate for money, so that's the reason why he came back to direct this film. Um, and I've also heard some reports say he came back because of his own reasons. I don't know why for sure. We probably never will know why for sure why Ishiro Honda came back to direct this film. Though honestly, I'm glad that he did because if this was supposed to be the last of the Godzilla series, which apparently Toho had no intentions of ending it, but if this was going to be the last of the series, it's perfectly fitting that at least all of them that are still alive, the original crew who created Godzilla, would be around to end Godzilla. So it is fitting. So with all that out of the way, let's get on to the plot of Terra Mechagodzilla. So of course, continuing after the events of Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, a few Interpol agents led by Inspector Kusaka search for the pieces of Mechagodzilla at the bottom of the Okinawan Sea. Using the submarine called the Akatsuki, I think that's what it's called, excuse me. They hope to gather some information on the robot's builders, of course, being the aliens from the third planet from the black hole, aka the Simians. The Akatsuki is suddenly attacked by a giant aquatic dinosaur called Titanosaurus, which is the name of a real dinosaur, although ironically, Titanosaurus in this movie is a theropod, being a predatory dinosaur, whereas the actual Titanosaurus in real life was a sauropod, one of those long-necked, four-legged dinosaurs. So the submarine is attacked by Titanosaurus, and the crew vanishes, more like dies in a horrible watery death as Titanosaurus holds the submarine in its hands and crushes it until it explodes. So Interpol agents start an investigation into this incident, and with the help of a marine biologist named Akira Ichinose, who is played by Katsuhiko Sasaki, they trace Titanosaurus to a reclusive mad scientist named Shinzo Mafune, played, of course, by Akihiko Hirata, as I said earlier, his final Godzilla movie, who wants to use Titanosaurus to destroy all of mankind for shunning him away from society because they thought he was just a crazy fuck. That sounds familiar. While Ichinose is visiting his old home in the seaside forest of Manazuru, they meet Mafune's lone daughter, whose name is Katsura. And she tells them that not only is her father dead, but she also burned all the notes about Titanosaurus at her dad's request. Also kind of sounds familiar. And unbeknownst to them, of course, Dr. Mafune is still alive and well, and he is visited by his friend Suda, who is in aid to the alien leader Mughal, played by the same actor who played the simian leader in the previous movie. However, I think it is established that they are two different people. They're just played by the same actor. Maybe they're twins. And of course, Mughal is leading the project to hastily and quickly rebuild Mechagodzilla. And Mughal offers their services to Mafune so that his Titanosaurus and their Mechagodzilla 2 will be the ultimate weapons against mankind. and they hope to wipe out all of humanity and rebuild the world for themselves, starting with Tokyo, of course, and branching out from there. But things get complicated for both factions as Ichinose begins to fall in love with Katsura and unwittingly gives her some Interpol information against Titanosaurus, the new Mechagodzilla, and also the Simians. And it is discovered as well that Katsura is actually a cyborg due to undergoing surgery, and Mughal still has uses for her in his evil schemes. And meanwhile, Mifune is desperate to unleash Titanosaurus without the alien's permission, so he releases it on Yokusaka one night, and Titanosaurus goes on a rampage. And by then, Interpol discovers that supersonic waves directed towards Titanosaurus are his weakness, so they build a supersonic wave oscillator in order to use against Titanosaurus. However, Katsura sneaks aboard the Interpol base and sabotages the supersonic wave beam before they can use it. However, Godzilla arrives. Oh yeah, Godzilla's in this movie. To fight off Titanosaurus, which he does rather easily, 50 minutes into the movie. And later, when Ichinose visits Katsura, he is captured by the Simians and tied up inside their base. Ichinose can only watch as Dr. Mifune and the Simians unleash Mechagodzilla 2 and Titanosaurus on Tokyo, going on a full-on out rampage, while Interpol struggles to repair their supersonic beam shooter, and the Japanese armed forces, of course, they can't do jack diddly shit to keep the two monsters at bay. And Katsura, while being controlled by Mughal, ignores Ichinose's pleas and controls both the monster and both Titanosaurus and Mechagodzilla as they continue to destroy the city. And then Godzilla comes to the rescue. Oh yeah, Godzilla's in this movie. And although at first he's outmatched by the two monsters, he still manages to get in some good licks of his own. And while Interpol starts to distract Titanosaurus with the supersonic beam, Godzilla is able to focus on Mechagodzilla 2. And while due to some stock footage that is flipped, Mechagodzilla unleashes another barrage of attacks down on Godzilla, but soon enough, Godzilla finally gets through and starts giving Mechagodzilla a good old-fashioned thumping, to quote the audio commentary. However, Interpol agents infiltrate the Simians' base. They rescue Ichinose and they kill Mifune plus many of the aliens. The remaining aliens attempt to escape in their ships, but after Godzilla destroys Mechagodzilla, wait, no, hang on. The remaining aliens attempt to escape in their ships, but while Godzilla is tackling Titanosaurus, he shoots them he shoots the ships down with his atomic breath, thus ending the alien threat. And Katsura, while being embraced by Ichinose, finally gains sentience and shoots herself to destroy Mechagodzilla's control device, which had been implanted in her stomach by the Simians. And this allows Godzilla to destroy Mechagodzilla. And Godzilla also defeats Titanosaurus with the help of the supersonic wave beam. Defeats Titanosaurus and then ends the series with Ichinose carrying Katsura's dead body to the ocean side as Mechagodzilla, as Godzilla roars a final triumphant roar, turns around, then heads back to the sea, thus ending the original Showa Godzilla series. So how about this plot? Well, it's definitely different to its predecessor, which isn't a bad thing. It definitely does feel more Ishiro Honda-esque, that's for damn sure, than being Jun Fukuda-esque. Gone is the James Bond corporate espionage type feel. Gone is the campy, but also kind of like middle ground, dark and campy tone of the previous Jun Fukuda Godzilla movies. and also gone is the overall fun tone of the film. However, the return of the Ishiro Honda feel, as we all know what the Ishiro Honda feel is like, it's a welcome addition. However, I still can't deny that this goes to show one of the issues that I have with this movie is that it really, in my eyes, it really is inferior to its predecessor because th- th- there's just something about this movie that um well, I certainly would say it's one of Ishiro Honda's most underrated unsung masterpieces. Meaning that I think this is one of Ishiro Honda's most overlooked best movies. Like I've never heard somebody say that they think that this is Ishiro Honda's best Godzilla movie. It's not, but that's Mothra versus Godzilla. But I still do think this is one of his best. There's just something about this movie's plot that just feels kind of off to me. Um, which is both good and bad because the return to form is welcomed. I can't deny that the inner Jun Fukuda fan in me misses Jun Fukuda. So, with all that said, let's get into the pros of Terror Mechagodzilla. First off, the cast is great. Pro number one is that this film has a really good cast. Um, so Katsuhiko Sasaki as Ichinose, I sort of have mixed feelings about him, admittedly, because on one hand, he is a likable protagonist, and you do root for him in his fight against the simians in this film, and also you do sympathize with him in his pretty much Romeo and Juliet esque type romance that he has with Katsura. However, that's where I have mixed feelings for Ichinose, is that at times when there's signs that Katsura is clearly not all there in the head, Ichinose just kind of chooses to ignore them, saying, "Oh, just it's nothing. It's nothing. She's just a sweet girl." That's kind of exaggerated as to what that really is like, but Ichinose just kind of seems like he's intentionally naive at times, and that kind of does irritate me a little bit. But overall, Ichinose is a good lead. He's acted way better in this movie than he is in Godzilla versus Megalon. Granted, he's playing a different character, but still, he's so much better in this movie than he was in Megalon. Um, Kind of an underrated leading actor, but it's kind of a shame that because the Godzilla series was ended at this point, he never got to shine in any other Godzilla movies, which is a shame. Tomoko Ai as Katsura Mifune, she does a very, very, very good job. I'd actually go this far. She's probably the greatest Ishiro Honda female lead in any Ishiro Honda film. I am dead fucking serious. She's very, very, very good. She's very good at playing a cyborg, but she's also very good at playing a conflicted cyborg. Meaning she has a lot of really good facial expressions and she has a lot of really good body language. Which, if you're playing somebody who is cybernetic, who is supposed to not have any emotions, you need to have both good body language and facial expressions in order to pull it off. I've seen some occasions where someone was playing a cyborg, unless it was something like, oh, I don't know, like, okay, maybe cyborg is kind of a poor choice of words to use. I think android is more a fitting term for Katsura because she's so I'd be willing to bet that even though we don't really see it on the inside, I'd be willing to bet that Katsura is potentially 65 to 70% machine. So there's still that 30% of humanity that's inside of her, but she is mostly a machine, and she comes off like she's mostly a machine. It's kind of Terminator-esque in that way. And of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger does a great job of doing it. But anyway, as I was going to say, I have seen some occasions where actors have tried to portray cyborgs or androids, and it just does not work. Probably one of the worst examples I can name off the top of my head is The Vindicator. which is a terrible movie, terrible movie. But that was definitely one where it wasn't well executed. It just looked like a guy in a suit, which it kind of was, but still, it just didn't come off right. But Katsura, she's very well acted. She's a very good character, though at times her exaggerated death falls, they're kind of cringy to watch. And also her dubber isn't the greatest. I've seen both cuts of this movie. The English dub for her, at times it's tolerable, but also at times it's unbearable, especially during her really exaggerated death feints. Oh god, it's it's cringeworthy, utterly cringeworthy. Um, Akihiko Hirata as Dr. Mifune is fantastic. I didn't know that it was Akihiko Hirata uh, in this movie for a long time, mainly because he's really unrecognizable. He has a like stereotypical gray mad scientist mustache. He's got the shade. Well, he doesn't really have shades on, but he has these big glasses that hide his face, and he has a gray wig. He really does not look like Akihiko Hirata underneath all of this stuff. Fucking fireworks. It's the 5th, not the 4th. Hang on a second. Let me close my window. Which I'm going to regret. Sorry about that. But Akihiko Hirata as Dr. Mifune, fantastic. I wouldn't quite say it's one of Akihiko Hirata's best roles, but he still plays the part very, very, very well. It's interesting to see Akihiko Hirata as a villain. Now, granted, the only other time I can think of where he did play a villain was from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, but of course, this is the superior performance by him. You know, I do like Sea Monster. Hirata is so much better as Dr. Mifune in this movie. Because, well, a lot of his performance, he does come off as being just a stereotypically evil mad scientist. There are times where he's very conflicted about being bad, and this is usually in his scenes where he realizes that the sins of the father have come to affect his daughter. And there's some scenes where he clearly does not like that. And I like that about his character, is that he is conflicted about what he's doing, but ultimately he does believe in his cause enough to put his daughter through all the hell that she's being put through in this movie and ultimately be okay with it. Which small part of me does kind of think he's a piece of shit for doing that, but he does care for his daughter, so it's not like he's using his daughter as a tool. He does clearly care for his daughter, as she's essentially the only family that he has left. So Dr. Mifune is fantastic in this movie. And the rest of the human cast, they're good. They're not quite as good nor as memorable as the cast from the previous film, of course, but they do what they do. They do it well. You're entertained. Move on from that. Deal with it. That's the way I see it. They're good. Let's just leave it at that. And Goru Matsumi, I think that's how you pronounce it, as Mughal. He's not as good as he was in the previous movie, I'll admit. He doesn't really have any of the slimy, like, I give no fucks persona that he played as in Kuronoma in the previous movie. Here, he's just kind of, once again, he's the generic bad guy here. He does it well, but he doesn't look like he's having nearly as much fun as he was in the previous movie, which is a little bit of a disappointment, but he still does play the part well. Pro number 2 is the dark tone of this movie. Now, as I said, I did say earlier that there's something about this movie's tone that just feels a bit off to me. But when the tone is right in this film, the dark tone of it, I think, is great. Um, I'm actually surprised that this movie wasn't written by Takashi Kimura because I actually think this would have been a pretty decent film for him to work on. Um, I like this film's dark tone. Well, this is still superhero Godzilla, and this is still kind of the kid-friendly, goody-goody two-shoes Godzilla. He definitely feels more grounded, more serious, and more badass in this film. He's not quite as badass as he is in the previous movie. That's like the apex of his badassness, despite my love for Godzilla versus Gigan. Um, not Mechagodzilla, excuse me. Godzilla still is fantastic in this movie, and this movie's dark tone, when it's right, it's great. It definitely feels a bit like a breath of fresh air, though not so much for me, because I like the campy tones of the previous films. However, to have the dark and the camp mixed together and mixed together so well in this film, it is a refreshing change of pace. Pro number three is the surprisingly decent human action. Ishiro Honda must not have given any fucks about doing any action scenes because the human action scenes in this film are actually quite brutal. And you see some actions in this film that you normally would never see in a Shiro Honda movie because he was a very humble, diehard pacifist. Like, name two examples. There's a scene where two of the simian henchmen fail in a mission to do something in the film. I can't quite remember. I think it was to either capture Ichinose or to like sidetrack Ichinose from discovering more facts about Katsura, and Mughal whips the shit out of these two henchmen, and he sentences them to death. Surprisingly brutal scene for an Ishiro Honda film, and probably the most brutal scene is both when Katsura shoots herself point blank in the stomach with a gun, and also when Ichinose he's tied by the wrists by a thing of rope, and he cuts his ropes loose on a sharp rock behind him, and he takes the string, or not really string, it's like rope, it's like that thick, and he uses the cords to strangle like the secondary alien henchman. And after a little while, eventually, when he dies, his outer skin gets torn off, which is a pretty gruesome scene, if I don't say so myself. So the human action in this movie is fairly decent. There's also a decent amount of blood. There's a decent amount of shooting. Overall, the human action scenes in this movie aren't bad. Um, so I don't know if Ishiro Honda just finally grew a little bit bigger pair of balls, or he was just given no fucks for the action scenes. Because we've established in the past that Ishiro Honda is not very good at doing human action. There's a couple exceptions, of course, this being one of them. But for the most part, he's not really a human action director. He's a human talking person. But still, the human action scenes in this movie, they're fairly decent. Pro number four, I believe, four is the music score by Akira Ifukube. Whoa. This score is so freaking good. I would definitely put it in my top 10 favorite Akira Ifukube soundtracks. Surprisingly, there's not that much recycled. Hold on one second. There's not that many recycled Godzilla tracks in this film. There's a couple here and there, but for the most part, a lot of this movie's score is original stuff. And it's fantastic. Mechagodzilla's theme in this movie, I actually think it's better than the Mechagodzilla theme from the previous film. Specifically, the main theme that you hear whenever you see Mechagodzilla. Dun, 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 dun. Oh my god, whenever I hear that music, I get shivers up my spine. It is so freaking awesome. It is, especially for this Mechagodzilla, it is very, very, very fitting. Very awesome to listen to. I could listen to that all day. There's also a couple really dark moments in this movie score too, specifically during the flashback scene where we first see Katsura being operated on to be turned into a cyborg. It's very simple organ music. It's some dark shit. And to quote, I think it was Keith Eichen who said it in the audio commentary, this is probably some of the darkest music he's ever composed since scoring the original Rodan in 1956. Oh my, that piece of music also sends shivers down my spine because it's so fitting because it just gives you the sense that what you're watching is so fucking horrible. It is so fucking unpleasant. Ugh. Akira Ifukube was on his A game when doing the score for this movie. Fantastic score. Pro number 5 is the monster fights. Even though there's kind of two, one is a short bout and the last one is a really long fight. Again, kind of like the previous film. The monster fights are really, really, really fun. Godzilla and Titanosaurus seem to be evenly matched for each other. Um, Titanosaurus is kind of essentially just another basic melee combatant. However, his size is in his advantage. Showa Godzilla is 50 meters in height, whereas Titanosaurus is 60 meters in height, a full 10 meters taller. So his added size does give him a slight advantage, but he's also more agile than Godzilla. Now this is due to Tatsumi Fuka, no, excuse me, Tatsumi Fuyamoto, who played Ultraman Leo in the original Ultraman Leo series, played Titanosaurus. So he was a very agile suit actor, which does make sense because Ultraman Leo is a much more physically involved fighter against kaiju. And Toru Kawai as Godzilla, he does a fairly decent job. I think definitely of all of the post Haru Nakajima suit actors, he's the one who's closest to Haru Nakajima as Godzilla in this film. And also Toru Kawai played Ultraman Taro in the original Ultraman Taro series. So essentially, when you're watching the Godzilla versus Titanosaurus fights, you're watching Ultraman Taro versus Ultraman Leo, which no Ultraman fan can deny. That's a fight that a lot of people have wanted to see. It will be a very interesting fight to say the least. But the monster fights are very fun. They're very dynamic. They're a lot more physically involved than the previous film. Like Godzilla definitely fight. He feels more like Megalon Godzilla, where he's definitely more of a hand-to-hand fighter. He was a hand-to-hand fighter in the previous movie too, but Godzilla fights more like a boxer in this movie, as he did in Megalon. But there's a lot of punches, there's a lot of shoves, there's a lot of throws. There's even one scene where Godzilla straight up Hulk lifts Titanosaurus over his head like he was about to throw him, but Mechagodzilla shot him in the back, so he wasn't able to do it. But that was an awesome scene. Um, Godzilla definitely is a lot more aggressive in this movie, and also he's also very much more aggressive against Mechagodzilla in this film too. Um, Especially in the scene where Godzilla goes through Mechagodzilla's barrage of fire, gets to Mechagodzilla and just starts beating the shit out of him. Awesome scene. Then you have that piece of Mechagodzilla music playing when that happens. It's so awesome. It is so awesome to watch. So overall, the monster fights in this movie, they're pretty damn kick-ass. Please don't go to bed. And the last pro that I have is the special effects for this movie are freaking amazing. Teruyoshi Nakano is definitely up to his A game once again. I would definitely say these effects are about as good as the previous movie. The explosions are on fleek. Why did I say that? The explosions are top notch. The wire work is really good, surprisingly. The composite shots, there's a couple shaky ones here and there, but the composite shots are good. The the optical effects for Mechagodzilla's eye laser, they still look good. I think they look a little better in the previous movie, but they still look good. Overall, the special effects are fantastic. I just don't have that much to say about them because they're very similar to the effects used in the previous movie. They're just ultimately, there's just not much to say about them. But overall, the special effects are great. So with all that said about the good stuff for this movie, what are the cons? I have three. The movie is kind of flawedly paced. There's just at times it seems like it's going relatively fast, and then there's times where it just seems like it wants to go faster, but it's just trudging along like a bad car. And it's a little antsy to get through the film at times, admittedly, but if you're patient, and also if you're watching this movie with the audio commentary, you can get through it. But this movie is not nearly as well paced as it was in the previous film. I don't like the ending to this movie that much because I don't like. At least there's one character who lives, but I don't like the downer ending for this movie. I can't deny that the sap in me does. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Someone's texting me. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I I don't like the ending for this movie. I think the sap in me does want to see Ichinose and Katsura, profess their love for each other and live happily ever after. I'm not gonna lie, I would like to see that. But this film's downer ending does kind of make it a little difficult to watch the ending to this movie, despite the kick-ass monster fight. Um, so yeah, not really the biggest fan of the ending for this movie. And also, this is my biggest issue with this movie is the lack of Godzilla. I would definitely go as far to say Godzilla has maybe about 12 to 14 minutes of screen time in this movie. And he doesn't even show up, not counting stock footage. This movie does use some stock footage. Not counting stock footage, Godzilla doesn't show up until 50 minutes into the movie. 52 minutes, actually, I think, to be more exact. And this is his first fight against. I'm getting tired. This is his first fight against Titanosaurus. Then he disappears for about 15 minutes. Then he shows up for the last 20 minutes of the movie. Can't deny it's a little disappointing that for this being the last Godzilla movie of the original series, we don't really see that much of Godzilla. I can't even say that you could feel his presence throughout the film, unlike in Godzilla 2014. The lack of Godzilla definitely is a downer, in my opinion, for this movie. And that's my biggest issue with the film. But outside of that, Terror Mechagodzilla is still a very, very, very good film. It's very entertaining. It's a good finale to the original Showa series. It's got some problems, I will admit, but it is still a fantastic movie, in my opinion. So I'm going to give this movie an 8.5 out of 10. I'm going to bed. Okay. I guess I gotta end this soon. So an 8.5 out of 10. I do recommend it. Though, don't be surprised if you don't see Godzilla that much. So post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this video with your friends, and as always, go out there and fall in love with a robotic female. They'll just hope she's not attached to any giant monsters. And I will see you guys in the next movie. Or next video with a ranking of the Showa Godzilla series. See you then.